Brethren, sisterin, we are excited to be sitting down today with a legend in the pest space, Neal Rummler. So just to give a little backstory on Neal, so Neal started in the door-to-door game back
Moxie.
with Moxie.
Yeah.
He started with Moxie and then has moved forward now and actually started his own termite marketing company called Maverick Marketing. He's a savant in the space, has a ton of insight that he's going to share with us from sales to what termite sales is and what we're going to be able to learn from him. I just feel like we're lucky. So thanks for being on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So kind of walk us forward. I'd love to just start like the beginning of your origin story. Where did it all begin? Who got you into the space? And yeah, bring us forward.
Yeah, so I came up here to BYU for school back in 2009, so that kind of dates me. And I went home, worked a summer after my mission at Disneyland. And have you been on the Jungle Cruise?
Yeah.
So I did that for a summer. So I told all those corny jokes. And believe it or not, that actually helped me in sales because you learn a lot about comedy and it's all about timing and getting people if you tell a joke and it falls flat, then you're like, oh man, it sucks. But it taught me humor can be used in sales. And where I incorporated a lot of that was with my icebreakers. That's one thing I think helped me in door to door was I didn't just jump into the pitch. I would say something clever and witty at the beginning. Not always, but that would break their preoccupation and really get them to engage with me. So it actually helped me in my sales career. And then I was looking at my paycheck at the end of the summer. I was like, $4,000. Well, I bought an engagement ring for my wife, and that was the whole paycheck for the whole summer, right? It's at that point I was like, okay, there's got to be something better. And I was just on Facebook, just scrolling, and it was just like missionary jobs, like RM missionary jobs, and I was like, oh, what's this? And it took me to like a summer sales thing. I had no idea what summer sales was because I grew up in California, and it was with Dewey Pest Control. That's what it was, and it was just like it seemed super shady. And I was like, "You guys want to take me out to lunch? Like, what's going on here?" Like, I just had no idea anything about the sales culture here in Utah. And then I had a buddy who had also done it, and so I called him. I was like, "Hey man, I heard you made like $40,000 in a summer. Like, is that legit?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, dude. Like, I can show you my pay stubs if you want." And like, I was a phone sale for him. Like, I just was like, "Well, do you think maybe I could do that too?" Like, I didn't need.
You were the golden investigator.
I didn't need any convincing because I was like, okay, like if I make half that, that's still way better than what I did at Disneyland, and it was fun working there. Like, it was, yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, it's definitely a conversation starter even today. Like, but I needed to make money, and I got engaged, and then we got married in May of 2013. Wow. And it was like over 10 years ago. I had $5,000 in my bank account, and I was like, I gotta make this work, because both my dad and my father-in-law both looked at me like, you're nuts. Like, you think you're gonna sell pest control door to door? You're out of your mind. So I had this chip on my shoulder from the very beginning. I was like, I gotta prove these guys wrong. Like, I gotta show that I can be a good provider. And yeah, so like it was pressure, but that's a big part of what pushed me.
What's awesome is you sought it out though. You found the opportunity, which that's rare for a lot of people. Well, talk to me too. I really like what you talked right there about sales and comedy and how engrossed they both are. Yeah. I think it's really important to have a joke land right.
Yeah.
I guess what are some of your favorite ways to kind of break preoccupation with humor?
Yeah, so you got to be really careful with this because humor, if you don't do it right, it's the most cringe thing in the world. And so I usually with rookies, I'll say hey, let's just stick to the basics first before trying to incorporate some of these wittier ones, because if you get the timing wrong, then it's actually worse than if you just went straight into the pitch. So one of my favorite ones was I would just go up and be like, if it was a housewife, I'd just be like, hey, I'm actually just dropping by because I'm the neighborhood gossip boy. So anything you want to know, I can fill you in on. And they would laugh, right? Because that's one thing too. It's usually what are salespeople? They're super loud and obnoxious. And so when you lower your voice, that's actually a way to get people to pay attention more.
Yes.
And so I've also noticed too, people with slight speech impediments, they do fairly well in door to door, or an accent, because it's different.
Yes. Well, and it's calming almost.
Yeah. It's if you have a slight lisp, they maybe feel a little sorry for you, what's going on here, but it gets them to pay attention.
Yes.
And so that's one thing that I was like, okay, they've heard the same pitch for the past 25, 30 years. You got to mix it up. Like, if you want to do well in this space, you can't just jump into, hey, I'm doing it dirt cheap. Like, that's what everyone's been saying for 20, for that forever. And so comedy, when used well, it works. It's just, you've got to build the confidence up and, try a couple here and there. And if a couple land, you stick with those, and you don't go with the ones that fall flat.
I love that. I also think too, it's really important to be calm. Like, you're just in yourself. If a joke doesn't land, like if it doesn't
Yeah.
go through, roll through it normal. Like, if you stop and be like, "Oh, did that work?"
Yeah.
Or like, "Did you not get it?" Like,
Yeah.
I see a lot of first year reps making that error.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. Well, and walk me forward. So your growth to leadership, though. So I mean, obviously that's how you got into the space.
Yeah.
You went out. So first summer with Moxie,
Yes.
and then from there, like, when was the transition to becoming like a team leader or bringing out people with you? In the
Yeah.
experience?
So originally, I didn't have any intention of recruiting. Pest control, summer sales was a means to an end to pay for law school. I thought I wanted to be an attorney. So I didn't recruit for the first 3 summers that I sold, just because I was like, okay, I'm going to make my money. I'm going to pay for my tuition, graduate without any debt. That was the goal, is just be able to say that I paid my own way through school and grad school. And so I didn't start recruiting. And then the funny story is, just like, I went to law school at BYU and quickly realized that attorneys actually don't make that much money for the amount of time that they put in. It's like they're working 70, 80 hours a week. Sure, they can make 200 grand, but that's like 2 full-time jobs. So
Right.
they're really only making 100 grand, and then it's after taxes. You factor all those things in. I was like, man, their take home is not very good. And that's pretty much what I was making when I was knocking doors. And so it's so funny because, like, I was in the bottom 50% of my law school class. And like, when I first got my first grades, my first semester, I thought my life was over. I was like, I'm not going to be wealthy. I'm not going to be rich. Like, because my whole life in school, I was brainwashed to believe, hey, if you don't get a 4.0, you're not going to be anybody. You're not going to be successful. And that, like, I still have like past trauma with that. It's like, you make a mistake, like, you're not gonna succeed, when it's the exact opposite. You need to make mistakes. And that's what I kind of have a beef with traditional education. I'm actually starting writing a book called Don't Buy the Lie. It talks about how traditional education has failed rising generations. And because I learned the hard way. I had 7 years of higher education, and I was like, did I really need to do that?
So we're gonna in forward time, we're gonna clip the link to the book right here, so people can
Yeah.
click it and make sure they.
Books take a long time to write, man. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
And do you know when you'll have it finished, or like you're like, oh, probably this time, or?
It's one of those things where it's like, I don't want to put a deadline on it, because it's like, I want to do it because I like enjoy it. I don't like, and
Well,
so
it's art. You gotta make sure it's nice.
yeah. And it's like, what'll happen is, like, I'll just have a thought pop into my head of like, oh, that'd be a really good story, and then I'll transcribe that story, and then it's just going to be like a puzzle piece where it's just like, I'm gonna put this one here, this one here, this one here, and it's really going to be catered to young people who are just kind of like, hey, do I go to college? Like, what do I do? And really the thesis is going to be like, hey, you don't need to go to college to be successful. You don't need to have a 4.0 to be successful. It's like, there's this, Robert Kiyosaki has this book. It's like, I think it's like A students work for C students. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
No, and I forget there's something with B students in there too. My grandpa
Yeah.
told me that when I was little.
Yeah.
Robert Kiyosaki, he's got some great stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, when was the first story of bringing somebody out? Was there like a guy you're like, hey, like, I was nervous about recruiting?
Yeah.
I think a lot of times there's a barrier to be broken on
Mm-hmm.
being like, hey, this was a hard thing that I did,
Mm-hmm.
but now going and inviting other people, I was a little bit apprehensive when I started.
Yeah.
Was there anything for you? Like, what was that story? Was that hard? Was it pretty easy for you to bring people in?
Yeah, so it started with just like my inner circle, just like family, friends. That's who you're going to have the biggest influence on. And what I learned in recruiting is, whoever has the stronger relationship, they're going to win that recruiting battle every single time. You could have a deal that's 10 times better on paper. They're going to go sell with their brother over you. Like, it's just, most of the time, that's how it's going to work. And so that's what I learned, is like, it's all about fostering and cultivating relationships, and genuinely caring about people. And so my first summer, I only recruited like 5 people, because it was just, I didn't know what I was doing. And then I found a really, really awesome guy out in California who just really blew things up for me down in Southern California where I grew up. And then that was 2018 where I had 5 people. Fast forward to 2021, I had a region of 70 guys. So it grew pretty quickly, but it took a lot of education. You know, I didn't just sit around and twiddle my thumbs. I was reading books, like audiobooks, on like how to recruit. I was talking to the best people in the space on how to recruit. So definitely put effort, because I viewed it at that point after law school. I was like, okay, I got to make this work. And I was treating it like a real job. Like, this is my career, and I'm not ashamed of it.
Yeah. So just for the audience, what were some books that like really changed your perspective on like sales, leadership, recruiting, that you're like, hey, these are like baseline. You've got to read these.
For specifically recruiting or leadership, or what would you say?
Just maybe some of your favorites. Like, what are some?
Yeah, so there's the staples out there, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Those are kind of like 2 really core ones to read. And then recently, like Chop Wood, Carry Water is one by Joshua Medcalf that I've really enjoyed. It's a shorter book, really, really easy read, and it's told in a story format where it's this guy, he's just trying to become a master samurai archer. And he wants like all these secrets, like these hacks of like, okay, how can I get there faster? And there's like, the master's like, there's no cheat code. It's like, you've got to do the basics. It's like really, really good people are just really good at doing ordinary things. Like the best of the best, they just focus on the fundamentals. And that's what what I saw a lot when I would take guys out to knock. They'd expect me to say some magic line, like silver bullet one-liner. And then they would be really disappointed when like, oh man, like, that was pretty much word for word in the script you gave me, you know? So,
yeah. And there's always that one guy in the office that's like skeptical the whole summer. What did you really do? Or even the like selling year.
Yeah. So I loved seeing that, because it was just like, it would be really eye-opening for them. They're like, oh wow, it's really that simple. I'm just too stubborn. I have too much of an ego to just buckle down and learn this.
Yeah. Well, and what it kind of reminds me of too is like Mother Teresa has a saying where she's like, there are no great things, there are only small things with great love. Yeah. And I think so often in our culture, just with like social media, movies, everything that we like, I don't know, it can kind of get you excited or get you like, oh, like that was hyper cool. I think like we look for a high, or we look for something extreme, when in reality it's kind of how you said, just small little things are where the magic truly lies.
Yeah.
So I want to talk really quick about Maverick Marketing and kind of like starting that. So, I mean, for those listening, I mean, you're a marketing agency that basically connects pest control companies with top tier sales reps that sell termites. Now, could you explain, just for this audience, what the difference is between like a termite sale and like a general pest control sale? And then walk us forward on like creating your agency.
Yeah. So the key difference is, as a door-to-door rep, you're showing up, you're looking like a sales rep. You're wearing a polo, usually Nikes, shorts. It's hot outside, and you're wearing a hat. And a termite sale, you're showing up like a technician. So you're in full tech gear. You've got knee pads, you've got a tool belt, a flathead screwdriver, flashlight, whole 9 yards there. And you're playing the role of a tech as opposed to a sales bro. And when you do that correctly, people trust you a lot more. Their guards are not up. And this is also an upsell. You're selling to current customers. So that's my business model, is I leverage current customers of pest control companies. And then I send in top talent to go in and upsell those customers. And it's totally different in the sense of like how you can push, because in door-to-door you have to push in the traditional sense, because you're fighting for control. It's like you're an uninvited guest. If you don't push, you're not going to be able to maintain control and close a sale. But when you're selling to somebody that's a current customer, you have to be more delicate. You have to persuade in a non-confrontational way. So I had to learn how to do that effectively, because you don't want to upset the customer, because then they're going to cancel their account, and it's not good for anybody in that situation. So I really started diving into psychology, human behavior, and just studying like higher level persuasion skills. I started reading books by Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. That's a really, really good one.
Amazing.
Yeah, so those principles in there, I've read that book probably 3, 4, or 5 times, and I'm still like, do I understand what he's saying? So it's like it's a more challenging read. But once I figured out the psychology of like his tactics when he's negotiating with terrorists, you can apply those principles to sales in a very, very effective way, and that doesn't ruffle any feathers.
Right.
So that's, I say, the key difference is you have to sell like more of like a trusted advisor, like you're guiding someone through a decision making process. Whereas pest control, it's a really good place to learn how to sell because it's very simple. It's like, hey, here's the features and benefits. This is how I can benefit. This is how it's going to benefit you. Close. And then if they don't respond, it's like, or they don't respond positively, it's, you do racking. That's what most companies teach: resolve, ace, close, resolve, ace, close. You can't really do that with higher ticket items because if somebody isn't sold on the necessity of a product or a service, like pushing is not going to get them anywhere.
Yeah.
And so my main strategy in teaching guys is sell using questions. Question-based selling is the highest level of salesmanship, because when you ask questions, the people sell themselves. You're helping them sell, like it's their idea. And if you want to put it in a colloquial term, it's their idea.
Well, you need to make them want it. And I love what you're saying right there. Basically, helping them see the landscape clearly is what you do as a salesman. Because if you really are peddling a great service with a great product, people will buy it if you can take out the things that are preventing them from making that decision.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think is a gift that you have, or just from observing from like after I've working with you for a little bit and stuff like that, I think you're really well connected. You've always been really a ton of people in the pest space, a ton of like different termite people. Like when did that start for you, that you were like, hey, I'm going to put a lot of feelers out to a lot of different people, just kind of keeping connections open? Is that just something that developed naturally, or is it something you push forward and make a conscious effort of constantly?
So you're making me think of all these books that I've read. 48 Laws of Power, another great one. The first law in there is your reputation is everything. Like there is like, I don't know if it's the first law, but it's a law in there where it's like you there's no reversal of that. And so I was always mindful of, it's like whoever I interacted with, I always made sure to like, hey, let's not burn a bridge. Let's keep it cordial. Like even if we don't agree, or like, because I've left companies because of broken promises, but I always tried to keep the bridge there. Just because you never know who you're going to end up working with down the road. Half my team left to another company in 2021, and fast forward to 3 years now, a lot of those guys are coming back and saying, hey, can I come do that termite thing with you? Because they know I'm a good guy now. It's like whatever poison was fed to them in the beginning of like, oh, he's the worst, they've eventually realized, like, oh, that wasn't true. Like Neal's actually a really good guy. Yeah. And he does what he says he's going to do. And so that's one thing that I would say, a piece of advice to everybody is like, guard your reputation with your life. Like there's no reversal of that. Warren Buffett has this great quote. It says, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 seconds to ruin it. Mm-hmm. So I've always like taken that to heart. And that's what I credit. Like the business that I'm getting now is referral business. And it's because people are like, other CEOs are golfing and they're like, hey, did you use Neal and his company? Oh yeah, he's great. Well, how, and it just sparks a conversation like that. And I have owners reaching out to me now because the model that I have, it solves a big problem for pest owners, because it provides this usually cash flow positive, and then it's really profitable in years 2, 3, and beyond. So it's a win-win for everyone involved.
Maintaining goodwill is huge, and like I think it's cool that we're talking about this, like where some reps will sometimes leave, and that's happened to almost nearly everybody in the space. It's at some point people have reps that have different interests, or they're being persuaded a different way. But I agree with you that keeping goodwill and making sure that people know that you did everything possible to make sure that they had a good situation, and I think a good taste in their mouth as people are parting is huge, because people do come back. Yeah. They do want to work with people that like were good to them, and sometimes too people are making a mistake and leaving, but then they have to kind of find it on their own. It's kind of like the prodigal son.
They learn the hard way.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's people, especially in sales, like we all have egos, and everyone just like, they'll look at something in an organization and be like, dude, I could do this. And it takes them falling flat on their face to realize, oh my gosh, like it makes them realize what they had. And sometimes that's true too, is like you don't realize what you have until it's gone. And so you don't want to take your leaders for granted. Whatever you think you can do, it's harder than you think. Like when I started the company, there was a good 3-4 months where I didn't have any money coming in. That was stressful, right? It's like I didn't think it was going to take 3-4 months to get things off the ground, but it's Murphy's Law. Everything takes longer than you expect. But yeah, it all worked out, and we're in a really good spot now. It's just you've got to just be mindful of those things that kind of catch up to you. It's like, no, it's gonna be harder than you think, and don't take for granted what you have.
I love it. So termite sales, basically, when did you make the jump personally into that? Like, when was the time when you were like, oh, I was doing general pest control, and this is where my lifestyle was at and what I wanted to change? When did you start just making that switch yourself?
Yeah, so that was in 2022. I had a daughter at the time, and it was just getting to the point where, hey, if I come back and do this again, and I have like 80, 100 guys in that range, like, it was just going to be really challenging with the family. My wife had been doing the summer sales thing for 10 years at that point, and she was kind of like, I'm over this. Like, and so I was just kind of at this crossroads in my life where I was like, hey, what do I do here? Like, I love the money. I love, the camaraderie of summer sales. There's so many things I loved about it, but I just saw it as not being sustainable long term. Like, I was in my 30s at that point. And so that's kind of where Moxie came to me. Is like, hey, why don't you come do termites? Like, it's a good kind of a transition for somebody in your situation. And so, yeah, that's the year that I kind of left door to door, and I gifted my downline to one of my other managers. And then I went over to termite and started learning the sale there at Moxie. And I was briefly at Fox Pest Control, and then also at Hawks for about a year before starting my own. And one of the reasons I started my own was broken promises, but also I just saw inefficiencies and things that I would do differently that I wasn't able to make key decisions on. I was like, hey, if we tweak this, tweak that, I think it would be really, really, really cool, and it would work a lot better. And that's kind of how where the motivation stemmed from. Is like, I think I can do this better.
I love it. It's funny how those small tweaks, though, are crucial for a sales organization to grow and thrive. Yeah. There's little things that, like, really can change the whole trajectory of, like, a sales team, and there's small things. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's just those little things add up on you having a successful summer. So in termite sales, kind of like, what are some of your favorite key differences? What did you like? What are some things you miss about general pest control, and what are some things that you're like, I am all in and I love this about termite sales?
Yeah, so pest control, it's kind of a lot of highs and lows, and it's like every single day you get out, like, I don't care how long you've done it, like, I would still get the butterflies before going out and knocking my door, and like the hardest door of the day was always my car door. But as soon as I got out, and like, we didn't have segways back then, guys. Like, I was sprinting to my go backs. Like, I was probably clocking like 7-10 miles every day. You know, and I was marking houses with crayons, no iPads, man, old school. And so I kind of liked that, where it was like it was just raw and competitive, and that the jitters kind of was like, I kind of liked that, because it like puts the pressure on you. Like, I gotta perform here. And then, I'd have a same day truck too, and I'm like, I gotta fill this guy. Like there was that pressure. So I kind of liked that. I treated it like a game in that sense, where, that's what I really liked about door to door. But what I didn't like is, I didn't like that I felt like I was in a boxing match every day. Like, I'm just like, man, I gotta fight. I gotta take the hits. And so, like, when you're young, you can take it, like, but after doing it for 10 years, man, I was like, man, I need a break. And then I step into termites, which is warm leads, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. And it was like a huge breath of fresh air. And what I like about warm leads is you don't have to push. Like, you can sell in a non-confrontational way, and there's going to be tension. Don't get me wrong. Like, don't confuse that with like pressure, but like, yeah, there will be tension. But once it's resolved, then it's like everybody's happy. Right. And I think that's a big thing with people, especially people that are rookies. They're not comfortable making other people uncomfortable. And sometimes you have to do that in sales. And once it's resolved, it's good. Everybody's chill. But yeah, I would say those are the biggest differences between the two sales.
I remember my first sale that I ever watched going door to door. I remember being so uncomfortable with like the things that the guy that was training me was saying. Mm-hmm. And I think you don't seek to make people uncomfortable, but sometimes there's a level of like, you have to be willing to say what needs to be said in order for everyone to make the best educated decision. Yeah. And sometimes that's breaking a little bit of social norms, and that's healthy and that's good. And I think learning that habit, that's one thing that sales teaches you that's super beneficial. And that's, I think, for anyone watching this that's like thinking about getting in sales, I think that's just a really good skill to have. Being willing to like go to honesty, go to the better situation, because a lot of times people are afraid to, and they use a lot of different mechanisms to keep them out of it.
Yeah, and it's like I would add to that. It's not so much what you say; it's how you say it. So I'll give you an example, something that almost got me punched in the face. So don't ever say this guy is with this tonality. So this guy, he said, I need to talk to my wife. And, usually 9 times out of 10, that's a smoke screen. He doesn't really need to talk to his wife. So this was a guy, he was probably like 5'4", so kind of a little man syndrome going on. And I was like, oh, so she's the one who makes the decisions. And the guy got beat red, and I thought he was going to punch me in the face, man. I was so scared. And so I had heard that line from somebody, and I was like, oh, that's a good line, but I didn't hear the tonality. So I didn't know how he said it. And so it's totally different if you say it with a chuckle. Oh, so she's kind of the boss then. She makes the shot. She calls the shots around here. If I say it like that, then he's not going to punch me in the face, right? Yeah. And so another example, too, of like, really good. This is a good one-liner. So if somebody says, when I talk to my wife, you can kind of flip it on him, put him on the defense, where you say, and this is a tactic I got from Chris Voss and his principle of going for no, where you say, okay, so just so I understand you, man, I think you should talk to your wife, but like, she'd be totally against this. Like she loves the bugs. She's one with the bugs. And he's like, whoa, no. She hates bugs, man. But I don't know. She's just like, we've been spending a lot of money lately. And then the real objection comes out. One thing that I would say to rookies is it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that's the biggest thing that I teach guys. It's like, that's where the real training happens is tonality and body language.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of times people get so focused. I remember when I started, like, I was like, I just got to say every single word exactly how the guy in front of me says it. And I think you should know the script and have it hand by hand. But really, your presence or your aura on the doorstep is more important.
Yeah.
And learning that takes some experience. But, yeah, I agree with you 100%. So, I mean, obviously, so now, I mean, to where you're kind of at, I mean, you're tenured in door-to-door, and you've made you're tenured now in termite. Kind of talk to me. I mean, you guys are doing millions a year in revenue on like with termites and stuff. What's kind of been some like key pieces of success of how you've been able to like build a downline of people and kind of keep everybody in a good, healthy spot?
Yeah. So I would say hire the right people. That's the biggest thing, because if you have a talented person that has a toxic personality, that's going to bring everybody down. And it's interesting what happens and what's happened in my organization so far is the low performers. I don't have to let them go. They call me and say, hey, I think I'm going to go home. And it's because they're not comfortable with elite performance. And it's like the saying, all ships rise with a rising tide. And that's what's happened. When you trim the fat, and this is my advice to managers, you might want to hang on to that guy that's selling 4 or 5 accounts a week. But I promise you, when you trim the fat, every single one on your team will sell better, because now nobody wants to be the worst. The bar has now been raised. Mm-hmm. And like in real time, what I saw happen, I started the summer of 2021 with 70 guys. By the end of the summer, we had a core group of about 30. And those core 30 guys, that group of 30 guys was selling more than those 70 reps. I'm not kidding you.
No, I believe it.
And it's like, I've seen that happen every single summer. I see the same thing happening now. And it's just, I was a runner in high school, and whenever I would go to the big invitationals, I would get pulled by the faster runners. Just like, and if I hadn't had those guys in front of me, it's really hard to push the pace when you're out in front and there's nobody else in front of you. But and that's why you see the Olympics, you see those rabbits go out. The people that run, they're setting the pace, and they pull those other runners. And so that's what I say. If you want to really perform, you got to surround yourself with elite performers.
I love that. Addition by subtraction is something that's really tough to learn as an early manager of people, but it's a very important principle to grasp. Yeah. I also think, too, being aware in your organization where the middle of the room is is key to having like a successful
What do you mean by that? Middle of the room.
middle of the room. So basically, like you have your low performers and you have your really high performers,
Okay.
and then the middle of the room is kind of the people that are cool being in between everything.
Yeah.
And the majority of your organization is typically going to go where the majority of everyone else is humming along. And so by removing the people at the bottom, you then move up the middle of the room, and people do not want to be. Sometimes people don't want to be the crazy guy that goes out and works crazy hard.
Yeah.
You always love when you find people like that
Yeah.
are willing to go balls to the wall. But those moving the middle of the room, their temperature to higher heights will make everybody so much better.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, because the top producers, they're going to take care of themselves. Like you just leave them alone. They're going to do their thing. And then the bottom 25%, they're always going to be the bottom 25%. Like that's one other thing that I learned is like, hey, no matter how much time I put with these guys, it might move the needle a little bit.
Yeah.
But really, where you want to focus is those middle guys. That's where you make your money, and that's how you can elevate the culture of your team.
I guarantee everyone listening to this that has managed is like thinking about the hours that they've sunk into that one rep. That like
yeah, it's not worth it. Like and it's like it's emotional. I get it. Like, but you have to learn when. Hey, it's better for this guy to leave and do something else.
Yeah.
You know, and those are some hard decisions you got to make, but it's usually better for both people in that situation.
So, I mean, now that you've had like all this experience in both pest and termite, I guess walk me through like what are some key things that you've learned along the way that you're like, hey, I think this could benefit anyone hopping into space, whether you're a first year rep, whether you're a guy 10 or 15 years in. What are some just key things that you're like, everyone could benefit from knowing X?
I'd say never stop learning. You know, if you don't invest in yourself and your education, you're not going to progress. Just like when you go to the gym, you got to stress your muscles to grow them. You got to do the same thing with your mind. And it's like I just see a lot of young people wasting their lives on their phones, like just like watching Netflix, playing video games. It's like, what are you doing, man? Like this is literally mindless activity that's not helping you progress as a human. And so I used to hate reading, I'll be honest, like because I associated that with school and work. And so there was a period of time where after law school, I didn't want to read anything. I was like, I'm done. I'm gonna watch movies. And you know, it took a little bit of time, but it got to the point where I was like, oh, if I'm reading something I'm actually interested in or that I want to learn about, I actually enjoy it. And so now Brian Tracy says, turn your car into a university. That's what I do is like, instead of listening to music, I listen to music, don't get me wrong, but like I like to put on audiobooks and like I call them shortcasts, or like there's this app I love called Blinkist where it summarizes books into bullet points. Another app called Shortform that I subscribe to that kind of gives you a Cliff Notes version of books, because I'm able to just get through more content and material that way. And you know, you see these things where it's like CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are reading a book a week, and it's just like, okay, maybe we can learn something from that. And so I would say like that applies to anybody. It's like, don't find something you're interested in and just continue to learn and grow from expanding your mind.
And sales can be a very grueling occupation, and no matter what you're selling, in the fact that like you're working with a lot of people, you're overstimulated a lot of times with electronics and different things. You have to get in front of the right like prospective customers. I think starting your day off having read something, there's something that it does to me where it calms my whole persona, and I'm able to walk so much better through the rest of the day when I have to go through the forest. And so I think reading is huge, and I think reading early in the day is really, really important to, I don't know, just have your whole central nervous system responding well to selling and making things happen.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of talk to me too, I mean, you've probably had some war stories along the way or some tragedies that happen. I think a lot of times when people get really emotional thinking about how they need to succeed and like, I want to avoid all the problems and there shouldn't be any in my journey. What were some problems that you overcame, and what were some things you've learned from it along your way?
Can you elaborate? Like, what do you mean problems?
So like, let's say like there was an issue like maybe first year where you weren't having success selling, or like maybe like you're like, hey, I was recruiting and this problem happened and this is what I learned. Or hey, when I made the jump to go start my own company, this was like a negative thing that like I kind of faced, but I slew that dragon.
Yeah, so there are definitely bumps along the road. Probably the most traumatic thing that happened was like when half of my team left. In that moment, like I don't think I ate or like slept for 3 days. Like, because I was like, oh my gosh, my world is over. Everything I worked toward is now half of it's gone. So yeah, that was really stressful in the moment. And then when certain companies didn't pay me, like I was like, man, like this sucks. Like, what am I gonna do? But looking back on all that, hindsight's 2020. Every single one of those like traumatic quote unquote events, it led to something better and it taught me something. And it's like and that's what I would say is like when you're going through a crisis, you got to ask yourself, is this going to matter in 5 years? Is this going to matter in 5 years? And that really helps you take a step back and realize, hey, it's probably not that big of a deal. Or I'm going to look at this. Maybe it's a big deal now, but like I'm going to grow and be a better person from this. Like it's going to teach me some lesson. And I can honestly say that about everything. And I think karma's real. And I'm a religious person, and it's just like, hey, I think God's in control of my life because it's like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing most of the time. And, it's like I've been blessed because of that.
Love it. Okay, kind of like winding down or finishing up the pod, I want to ask, what are some of your 3 favorite closes?
Closes?
Yeah.
For what product?
Let's go. I want to hear one for termite, one for general pest, and then if you sold anything else, I'd love to hear something else too.
Yeah, you put me on the spot. So with termite, it's probably just, it's very simple. It's like, will this work for you? Is that fair? So it's like very kind of like a softer approach where I usually don't say to use an uptone, but you are asking a question there, so it's a little more soft that way. Pest control, I would try to get in the backyard. That's another like pro tip. You get in the backyard, now you're their buddy, and there's a simple option close, kind of a heat check. It's like, so besides the ants here, what else would you want me to focus on? And that's a good, like, it's not a hard close. I don't like really hard closing because it's like hard close, it's over kind of. But if I do a soft close like that in the middle of a pitch, I can tell they're interested, or I can gauge how interested they are. If they say another bug at that point, I'm like, okay, I think I can get them at this point. Okay, where are you seeing those spiders? And then they'll show you and be like, oh yeah, we'll definitely take care of this. And what was your last name? And then shut up. Like that's a big issue that I see a lot of rookies do is they're uncomfortable with silence. But in those types of situations, whoever speaks first loses. And it's going to be awkward. Like I've had sales where it was like, I swear it was like a minute of just dead silence. And then I look up and the guy's like, wow, you're really well trained. They've even told you the power of silence. The guy had no bugs. And he's just like, you've done enough to earn this sale, son. I was like, that felt good, man. That was good for the ego.
He's like the Godfather to giving you his blessing.
He was just like chuckling, It's just like his old retired guy didn't need it, but he's just like, wow, I'm really impressed at how well trained you are, And I've had those moments. Like I'm a sucker. You knock on my door, like I bought every single product, man. It's like because I know what it's like.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's in and that old saying like I think Zig Ziglar said it. He's like every great salesman buys from a good one. So it's important to pass that along and remember that abundance it doesn't flow to you, it flows through you. So, well, I mean, I kind of just want to touch a little bit more on the termite thing, and then we'll kind of wrap up. But as far as like lifestyle goes, like what are some benefits of selling termite opposed to selling like general pest control, like lifestyle?
Yeah, so it's most of my guys are in their mid-20s, and they've been knocking doors for 5-6 years a lot of times. And I won't hire somebody who hasn't done door-to-door just because that's kind of the fiery furnace where if they're successful in that, they're going to be good at termite most of the time.
Can I say one thing on that real quick?
Yeah.
I think a lot of industries look at that too. I've heard of people getting into like med school. I've heard people getting like tech jobs and other stuff because they've seen someone go through door to door. And I think it's the same with termite. I'll see a lot of guys their first year be like, oh, I want to jump to termite right away. And I'm like, you kind of got to go through the battle.
Don't let them. Like if I were you, I wouldn't let them because they're not going to appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's if you've pounded the pavement for 5 years, you're going to appreciate those leads way more. And you're going to be more skilled. You're going to be able to handle, and you're going to be teachable. That's the other thing is you've got to be teachable. You've got to be humble enough to take direction because a lot of times guys think, oh, I know how to sell, but it's different. You got to adjust your style.
Yeah, that's cool. I love it. Well, dude, just Neal, and anything kind of like in wrapping up, is there anything else you want to say or kind of leave everybody with that you're like, hey, I think this is important or this is some good knowledge?
Yeah, I would say I would stress the importance of doing hard things. And door to door is a great way to cut your teeth in that. I think it's honestly, that's like the best thing you can do as a young person. I hear a door to door success story every day. I feel like it's like I didn't know the founder of IKEA started knocking doors. He was selling matches in his home country of Sweden. You see all these like super wealthy people, and a lot of them started in door to door. Jordan Belfort, Grant Cardone, the CEO of Spanx, I can't remember her name. And you just see all these success stories, and you're like, wow, maybe there's something here. Because what I talk about in the book, Don't Buy the Lie, is like, hey guys, like, you don't need a college degree, because a college degree back in the day, that used to differentiate you. That used to set you apart. Not everybody went to college. Now most college degrees, it's the new high school diploma. It doesn't set you apart. And so if you want to be somebody different, you got to stand out. Door to door is a great way for you to stand out. And it's because it's hard. Like, young people aren't doing enough hard things, and that's what I want to change. It's like, I think it's great. Anybody who does door to door, who advocates for people doing door to door, I think it's a great education for young people, because they need to get their teeth kicked in a little bit. Because if you do hard things, it's like, oh wow, everything else is easier at that point, and it doesn't get harder than door to door.
Yes.
So do hard things.
I love that bit. I hope everyone watches that. And it kind of reminded me, I just recently watched JFK's announcement when he told America that they were going to try to go to the moon.
Yeah.
There's no space program. Like they had like zero preparation on it, but he just made the statement. He's like, hey, and what I love it, like towards the end of his speech, he says, we choose to go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And I think a lot of times in life, people love to sell you like the easy, the laid back path, but the hero's journey is so much more entertaining, and it's so much more fulfilling to just go out and do something hard. So, Neal, dude, anyone watching this that wants to do business with Neal, he's a great guy. I've loved working with him. So appreciate you, man, and all that you do, and thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, it's fun.
So, all right, nos vemos.